Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, it was allowed.
Okay. Okay. So now we are talking about the evolution of technology. So before .NET, because .NET is introduced in 2002, before .NET, Microsoft have a language that is called VB language, Visual Basic. And this is the software, this is the example of the software which is developed in Visual Basic. And still that MS Office is upgraded and use the Visual Basic as well. Now the Visual Basic is supporting the .NET technology, but before .NET technology, the Visual Basic is an independent language, and for that particular language, Visual Studio will provide a separate software or a setup of tools to install and run that application.
Yeah, during my studies, I did VB6.
Yeah. So they will provide us some setup to install, and then they will provide you editor, and then using that editor, you will be able to run the Visual Basic program. But for now, if you want to use VB, there is no need to install anything. You just have a .NET technology and the Visual Studio editor, and that's it. So before that .NET technology, there is a two technology. Generally, the Microsoft are working on that. That is the OLE technology, and that is the COM technology. So that two technology are basically, I can say, OLE technology, if I'm talking about, is a completely a linking or embedding technique they will use. Linking and embedding technique is what? Is a kind of a, I can say, a technique by which the application will attached or a link of a particular document or any kind of image or any kind of resources that you want to use in that application, you can embed it on that particular applications instead of linking. So there is a two kind of approach to display the things on a particular tool. Suppose this is a PPT. If you want to show some image, so there is a two way to display that image. So first of all, you have to go to that insert or something and particular option to insert the image, find out the image location, and simply add that image on that particular slide. So once that image is added and once you have saved it, so that image is embedded to that particular document instead of linking that particular image. Linking, I mean to say, if you copy that particular file and open in a different operating system where that image is not available, but still that image is visible on that different operating system, because that image is embedded with that particular document instead of linking that particular document. In the HTML, you can see in the HTML, basically, if you, Daniel, if you learn HTML, if you include any kind of image, if you want to show any kind of image in HTML, first of all, you have to provide a location from where you get that HTML. And then there is a tag is called img tag. And that img tag having a property called src. So that src having a src property need a location of your image. And in a src, if you provide the location of image where you have already saved that particular image in the folder, and just provide that folder location to that src, and when that HTML file run on the browser, you will able to see that image. But if you copy that particular file and just particular file move to the different folder, or simply you can move that particular image to different folder, and then you can refresh the page, you can't see that image. That means the HTML will not embed that image. The HTML is only linking with this image. Once that image is moved to particular location, to different locations, the HTML will can't find that particular resource, and they will display on the UI that we can't find that resource, can't find that image, and they will show some kind of a not found error or not find of image kind of a thing. So that kind of a linking or embedding things. So when we develop a such kind of application where we need to embed the component instead of linking, so they will introduce a technology that is called OLE technology, that is called object linking and embedding. First of all, link the particular things, embed it into that particular document and save it. So that kind of feature they will introduce and they will achieve using that technologies. Clear? Embedded and embedding part.
Yes, yes.
Then the new technology they will introduce, and the requirement comes in the role that uh, Microsoft doesn't have all kind of features or all kind of feasibility developed. For instance, if you want to develop some kind of a media player, for example, if you take, and in a media player you want to in a media player generally you want to play a audio file, or in a media player you want to play some video file. As you know that in a very far I think 5 to 6 years back, the media player or any kind of a graphics or any kind of animation, I can say, is only visible on the browser or any HTML or any kind of a software. We need a flash player. The flash player is very responsible to run that particular ActiveX control or ActiveX animation things. So that is a component which is a completely a separate component which is not owned by Microsoft, which is owned by Adobe. So there are lots of component which is not owned by Microsoft. So Microsoft should have that feature. Microsoft need that feature to introduce in your application, in your software. So then they need such kind of a component, so they will easily integrate that technology in that .NET framework, and efficiently they will use that particular feature. Instead, as we know that this is the third party control, but still we are able to use that. So if you want such kind of a technology or a third party control that you want to use in your .NET framework, you will develop that component as a COM component instead of a .NET component. So in the COM component, generally we develop or create a resource or a component which is not owned by Microsoft, which is owned by some other third party. So that kind of a technology will introduce, and that technology is known as component object model. That approach will help to integrate any kind of a third party component in the .NET framework. And still that COM technology is running and upgraded. It's not moving because still we need a multiple third party component. Still the Microsoft doesn't have all components and honor of that particular components. Still that Adobe having a video player and audio and PDF kind of a things. If you want to run and open that PDF file, you need that component which is owned by Adobe. So that still required, needed. So that's why that component model object will be upgraded, and they will provide object-oriented kind of a concept. So new features, new technologies comes. So based on that, they will enhance that component as well. So still that both the technologies are there. It's not a replacement of those technologies, but before .NET, these are the two main technology Microsoft generally use to develop their application. Clear? So as you can see in the last point, they are clearly mentioned that the family of the COM component includes COM plus. Why we introduce COM plus? Because previously the component they will develop is not object-oriented programming supportable language. That VB is not object-oriented at that time, but now the VB is object-oriented programming languages. So we need to upgrade that technology as well, so that they will support object-oriented programming languages as well. So they will develop a component, COM component, which support object-oriented as well. So that's why they will introduce COM plus. distributed COM, such kind of a tool or such kind of a library that is available to extend or use any kind of languages. It's not depends on particular .NET languages. So COM will provide you a feature to develop that component and use anywhere, whenever you required, whenever you used. And that is the ActiveX control also introduced. ActiveX control is a kind of a animation where you want to display some kind of animation in a Windows platform, especially we can't run the animation, but that ActiveX control will provide you the feasibility to run any kind of animation, any kind of a video, any kind of things easily on a Windows form as well. In a web it's very easy, but in a Windows software, if you want to run the animations, we require that ActiveX controls. So that component will available by the help of COM component they will develop. So that kind of technologies and things will be available in before that .NET. Clear? Any question regarding that COM and OLE?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
You have
So,
anything, Abhishek?
No, it's clear.
okay. Now we understand the technology, that is the .NET technology. We understand before the .NET what kind of technologies are available and how that things are developed, what are the features and what are the uh, why we use .NET technology, what are the components. Now there is a one another keyword introduced, that is called framework. So that framework will provide you the, I can say, a pattern of development. So while we are developing an application, we always think from where to start. So framework will provide you a design pattern and explain you this is the way of development of console application. This is the way of development of web application. This is the way of development of services. This is the way of development for app applications. So if you have the framework, that means you have a blueprint or a design to develop any building. For instance, if you want to build a building, first of all, you have to prepare a blueprint of that. If you have the proper blueprint, then you will uh, develop a good building. If you don't have the blueprint and instantly you have started, okay, the building is very easy to develop. What we can do, we can just create the base and then pillars and everything. But in the end, you can say, okay, no, this that particular place we want some different things. But now you can't alter that particular things, but because that is already developed. So before we start, we need to have some kind of a design patterns. So that design pattern will state you that, okay, this way and this process you need to be follow, then you will develop a good application. So that kind of a design pattern the framework will provide. During that process, and as I told you that the applications that we have developed, Windows, console, web services, user control, anything. So for any kind of application, if you want to develop, you should have the design patterns, and that design patterns the framework will provide to you. Then we can easily, efficiently develop. When we talking about the design patterns, they will provide you a compiler as well, or libraries as well. Why we need the library to develop that kind of applications using that particular framework? Because the framework will provide you the design patterns. Okay, this is the way to develop the building, this is the way to develop a application. For what? But for that applications, you need some kind of a utility, you need some kind of a tool that help to create that applications. Because in a paper or in a blueprint, you can't create your applications. You have to write code, you have to use the library, you have to use the inbuilt or custom libraries. You need a compiler so that the operating system will understand your code, because operating system doesn't understand that particular language, and that particular language is very high level. High level in the sense it's in a basic human readable languages. So you wrote a code in a human readable languages, but computer will don't understand that human readable languages. They understand only binaries. So how that design patterns which we developed, and how that code we want to compile it, and then the operating system will understand, okay, this is the code that we want to execute in the browser, this is the code that we want to execute in a command prompt, this is the code that we want to develop and return some data only, not execute anything. So how the compiler, how the operating system will know that particular parts? So the component that basically need to design, we need a libraries as well. That's why in the bottom line it states that there is a major two base component of framework that the design pattern completely depends on the libraries part. The first one is a base class library, and the second one is a common language runtime. This is the highly two important part of the .NET frameworks that totally depends on that particular things, because without these two components we can't develop anything, because these two components will provide you all the feasibility, all kind of an environment where you have developed your application. So when we're talking about the first component, which is a base class library and the framework class library. So before we move to that particular two components, the framework will provide you such kind of architecture, and simply state that, see, this is a C# language, you have a visual basic languages, we have a J# languages, we have a VJ# languages. So now you have a design patterns using C# or using visual basic, you will able to develop a web applications, you will able to develop a web services, you will able to develop a console application or user control. But in the J# or visual J#, you will only develop Windows applications, only develop a console applications. You can't develop a web application, you can't develop a web services. So they will already provide you the design, only to provide you all the informations, what we can develop, what we cannot. But whatever the applications you can develop using these languages, you need these two components, which is common for all. It doesn't matter which language or which kind of application you want to develop. Any kind of application, any language you choose, you need to those two components. That is the BCL and the FCL and the common language runtime. This is the two major components which required to understand the application's architecture and the design patterns by which you develop application. So this is the two major component, and this is the application that we will develop using these languages. I take an example of that 4 languages only, but they will support multiple languages, and that multiple language has a different limitations. Few of the languages having a feasibility to develop any kind of languages like C#. The C# language is a very high level languages, and in the using C# you can develop multiple kind of applications. There is no any such kind of a restriction on that. But a few languages are having a restriction, like you can see this JSAP and visual JSAP having some restrictions. You can't develop a web application, you can't develop a web services. So that kind of design patterns or information, they already have that, and based on that design patterns you can start your application development. But for all kind of application development, for all kind of languages, you should have to follow these two components. You have to go through these two components, the framework and the common language runtime. Okay, so this is the actually major component, I can say. Now we are talking about the BCL. See, library in any languages, we have that library, because whenever the language introduced in the market, they always think about that those person who are using these languages is not expert in a computer field. They are trying to learn, and they are trying to learn to develop something, not developed a language, a parallel languages. They want to develop something to use it. For that purpose, they understand and they learn that particular languages. So the perspective of that particular developer who developed that languages is to provide all kind of a facility or all kind of inbuilt things that help developer to build the applications very easily. Suppose if you want to write a program to display today's date, right? So for today's date or any kind of a operation you want to perform, or any kind of a, I can say, date, or I can say some kind of a square root if you want to fetch, or multiple mathematical operation you want to do. So they thought in the mind that application or a developer have a only use that applications to develop something, why they invest the time to find out how we can get the current date time from operating system. Instead of investing that particular time on that operating system, how we will get that particular time on from the operating system? Why not why not we will provide you a particular library, and using that library they will easily get that operating system time. So the requirement will be fulfilled. So the developer will focus on particular requirement, not that particular the data from where we get that particular things, because this is a completely not a particular not a, I can say, a part that we learn or that we try to understand. Our requirement is to display the date. That is our focused point. So the developer or a language inventor think about like that. We will provide you a library, we will provide you a function, we will provide you a all inbuilt functions, inbuilt support, so that they will help you to build your applications very easily. So instead of investigating that particular operation, if you want to find out the square root, I will provide you the library. Use that library, you will get the square root. If you find out the cube root, I will give you the library, I will give you the method, you will get that cube root. If you know the sine theta, if you know the cos theta value, if you know anything, any mathematical operation, I will provide you the library. You don't invest your time on that particular thing. You just focused on your requirement and the development process, so that you can easily deliver that particular product to the client. So that is your focus, not the other part. So that's why we need a library. So they will introduce a library, and that library in a .NET framework, they will state that this is a base class library. So base class library is a standard library available to all languages, which is .NET framework. Simple statement is that. So this is the library which is available for all .NET languages to develop a program. Correct. Either it is a C++ or a Visual Basic or any kind of a J Sharp or any languages which is supported by .NET framework, they have that VCL languages. Now the question comes in the mind, why, if the BCL is already there, why we need FCL? So next library we can talk about that FCL, framework class library. So as we know that initially the language introduced where there is no concept of graphics, there is no concept of database connectivity, there is no concept of XML, there is no concept of reflection, there is no file input operations are performed there. So initially that language is very basic. They will provide you a library which is supported and available for all languages, but they have limitations. When the technology comes, when the .NET framework comes, they will introduce some new features, new enhancement, new form-based application, new reflection kind of a thing, database connectivity with all kind of a database, not only SQL Server. They will provide you the library which is uh, efficiently connect with the Oracle. They will provide you the library which is efficiently connect with the Foxflow, any kind of a database if you want to connect. So they will introduce more libraries, and that is object-oriented libraries. So they will say, okay, when we are talking about .NET framework, so instead of .NET framework, why we are not introduce a new terminology that is called framework class library instead of BCL? Because we are introducing a framework, so instead of calling BCL, it's very easy or very understandable thing why we are not saying framework class library instead of BCL, because that framework class library have all the new features as well as the old feature that we have already in the BCL. So they will introduce a new terminology that is called FCL, that is a framework class library, and that is very relevant to that particular technology, that because that .NET framework are generally introduced and that framework keyword are already there. So that's why they are introduce a new terminology that is called FCL, and that is very suitable and understandable as well to understand understanding point of view. Okay, now we are talking about any query regarding that FCL and BCL, why we need library, Daniel?
Yes, clear.
Okay. In between any doubt, just stop me. I will answer that. No problem.
Yeah, we will definitely.
Okay. Now we are talking about the component of .NET technology. When we are talking about the component, we include everything which is a core and everything which is a part of features. That's why we represent this slide as a component of .NET. As you can see, the top label, we mentioned that common language runtime. We mentioned that common type system. We mentioned that common language specification. That is the CLS. .NET Framework Class Library, that is FCL, assemblies and metadata, Windows Form, ASP.NET, Windows Presentation Foundation, Windows Communication Foundation, Windows Workflow Foundations, Windows Card Space, Language Integrated Query, this is LNQ, MBC, Model View Controller, API. So top 5 is a major component, I can say, in the .NET, and other below are the feature that is introduced in a .NET framework. And that major component is basically used in a CLR basically. But we consider all are the component of .NET framework. One by one, I will explain you the major part, that is a common language runtime, where we introduce CTS and CLS, everything. And these are only the features and the technology they introduce in .NET framework. Now the major part of that .NET framework or a language perspective, this is the actually main component of our .NET framework, that is a common language runtime. Any basic questions every time you have to face that, what is CLR and why we need that CLR. So as we know that when we learn any kind of a language, we need some kind of an environment. So suppose if you have an office and that office having a multiple type of operations performed, so you have to separate out that office in a different sections. So this is the IT department, this is the HR department, this is the different department, this is the different department. Why we do that? Because the separation of concern is very easy and very identifiable when we are enter the office and visit that particular department. So anybody can tell you, if you go to that particular office, anybody can easily decide which type of work and in which department you want to visit to resolve your query. So that particular environment is very important for any kind of a languages, because Compiling the things and executing the things, that is a different thing. You wrote something, you compile it, and just run it. This is the basic flow generally we are following in a previous languages. But .NET framework or the C# language provide you, no, this is not a proper way, because we are supporting multiple languages. We are not restricted with one languages. For instance, if I am explaining the common language runtime, I will give you one example. Suppose if you are sick, then you will in your mind, first of all, you can think, okay, I am sick, I am not well, then we need to visit a doctor or clinic. That is the first state of mind you are thinking. Okay, now we should visit the clinic. Okay, you go there, you consult the doctor will prescribe some medicine, some lab test, so whatever the things. So for medicine, you have to go to the medicine store, then you just collect that medicine, and after getting that medicine, you have another work is called lab test need to be performed. So you have to find out the lab, go there, and whatever the process is there, you have to just complete that process. So for your wellness, you have to visit the clinic, then go to that medical store, then you have to go to that laboratory. That all three places are important to cure yourself. So this is a process. If I want to introduce a very efficient way, because in this process, what are the drawback? In this process, there is a drawback. The first drawback is it is a very time consuming process, because first of all, I go to clinic, then there is a time, there is a one, I think it took, I think, half an hour, and then we go to that store, it maybe took 15 minutes, then we go to that laboratory, it may took half an hour. So it is a very time consuming process. If doctor is a physician, and they will identify, okay, this problem is due to your eye issue, so you need to visit that eye specialist. This issue is related to your heart, then you have to visit the cardiologist. So then again, there is another process need to be performed by yourself. Okay, now we need to visit the cardiologist, now need to visit the ENT department. So again, you can follow the same process. You can find out the specialist one, because that physician will tell you that, okay, I am not a specialist for that particular problem. You have to visit that particular specialist to cure yourself. This is the one of the process to cure yourself. The another process I will introduce in front of you, and then you can decide which one is the better option. The next option I will give it to you. I will provide you one hospital, and in a hospital you can go there, whatever the problem you have, just explain to that particular window, and they will provide you a receipt to that particular department. Okay, you have a chest pain, okay, you have to visit that cardiologist. Directly they will refer you the cardiologist, and then cardiologist specialists are there. They will provide you some kind of prescribe you some medicine. In the same place you have a medicine store. If they prescribe, or if they suggest any kind of a lab test, in the same place you have a laboratory. So how efficiently and how all the process completed in a single place. So Daniel, if I ask you, there is a two options to cure yourself, which option is the better option? What do you think?
Hello.
Yeah, I'm asking you. There is a two option. Just I explain you which one you choose.
Can
There's
you
a
can you repeat the option?
The option one is to cure yourself. Suppose you are sick, and to cure yourself, you need to visit a clinic. And
Mhm.
then in a clinic, the doctor will prescribe you some medicine to go to the store, and then they will provide you they will prescribe some kind of a lab test, and go to that lab test. And then you come to know that, okay, I have a problem of uh, a heart. Then you have to visit the cardiologist, and then you can again follow the same process. This is the one process. The second process to cure yourself is to I will provide you a location where you have to go to that hospital. Okay, so there is one hospital. In that hospital, every department, every specialist are there. You will find out all the things in a single place. Which
Definitely
one
the
you will
single place.
prefer? Yeah, which one you prefer?
I will prefer the single place.
So that kind of thing provided by the CLR. The common language runtime will provide you a hospital kind of a facility. Okay, with the common environment for all languages. It doesn't matter the patient is a patient having an issue of lungs, patient have an issue of a generic issue, a patient having issue of eye, ear, nose, anything. We have a specialist there. So I will provide you a hospital. In that hospital, everything is there in a single place. So .NET having a multiple languages, and they will provide you a single environment for all languages. So that's why we need a CLR, common language runtime, and it is not a compiler. It's just a environment where you compile your code. Okay. So CLR is not a compiler. Misconceptions. The wrong interpreter, generally developer will follow that CLR is a compiler, but no, CLR is not a compiler. CLR is a common environment where all your process, all your coding process will be performed, all your compilation will be performed, or your security checks will perform. So this is a compiling environment. Okay, this is not a compiler. That is the first time. So you got my point. What is CLR? CLR is a common environment.
So this CLR, once you install .NET framework, so it will be installed in your, I mean, no need to separately install it or something, right?
Nothing is separately. I am just explaining you the core thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Before we move to the particular language and write the program, we need to understand how the program will compiled and how the program will execute. So this is the internal process. When
Okay.
you write a code and when you write to compile the code, how the system will know that this is the C# language. And we need to